Next, I'd like to invite Kathy Neset, President of Neset Consulting, to join me on stage with Bryan Pickett, who is the General Manager for America's Unconventionals for ExxonMobil. Kathy is the owner and president of Neset, which provides engineering and geologic expertise to the oil industry from their headquarters in Tioga. Kathy has been inducted in the North Dakota Petroleum Council Hall of Fame, has been the Petroleum Council's chairperson of the board, and received the Williston Basin API Chapter Lifetime Achievement Award. Bryan joined ExxonMobil in 2002 as construction engineer assigned to onshore fabrications in Malaysia. He has worked in supervisory roles in the Gulf of Mexico, California, Australia, Germany, and Canada. Bryan transferred to Dallas, Texas in 2019 as a senior advisor to ExxonMobil's management committee. Bryan began his current role in the Unconventionals as general manager in 2002. Please join me in welcoming Kathy and Bryan.
Well, thank you, Todd. What a nice welcome. We appreciate that. And thank you, Bryan, so much for being here with us. You know, we in North Dakota in the Williston Basin, we love learning and getting more information on what's going on here and around the world. Can you share a little bit your story and tell us a little bit about Bryan and your America's portfolio?
Yes, sure. Well, Kathy, first of all, thank you. Glad to be here today and get to enjoy this great conference. So as mentioned in the intro, I've 22 years with ExxonMobil, have spent that really all on the upstream side of the business. So, preparing, planning for oil and gas developments, operating oil and gas developments, and then in some of my interactions with the corporation on managing capital allocation across our broader portfolio. I have been in my current role as America's GM for about 2 years, and that's in our unconventional business. And just to give some context to where that fit in, obviously ExxonMobil is a large corporation, but for our oil and gas producing portion of our business, we're really split up into 5 major types of production, if you will. So there's deep water, there's LNG, there's conventional, there's heavy oil, and then there's unconventional, and that's the business line that I'm in. In unconventional, we are split up into really 2 parts of the business. One is Permian, so we have a general manager for the Permian, and then as opposed to calling it non-Permian, they gave it the title Americas. So what does that mean? So my portfolio includes, obviously right here in the Bakken, and I will tell you the Bakken is our cornerstone of my portfolio. But as we work our way south, I also have our assets in Oklahoma, out east in the Marcellus and the Utica, in Appalachia, getting into East Texas, the Haynesville. I've got the Eagle Ford in South Texas, and then a little farther south from there in Argentina, I also have a business in the Vaca Muerta Basin. But as I mentioned, Bakken is I guess I should say, my portfolio in total, we make around 330,000 barrels a day of oil equivalent, the largest of which is right here in the Bakken at about 115,000 barrels per day. So love the asset, a really important business for us. Historically, we've been here more than 10 years, and we have a lot more to do going forward.
How do you, let's go into that a little bit. How do you see the Bakken continuing to be, at the forefront of XTO and Exxon?
Yes. As I mentioned, so the Bakken is obviously the cornerstone of my portfolio. My job as general manager across all of my assets is ensuring I lead the team in the right way to get the most long-term value out of the resource. And when we do that, all stakeholders benefit. Local communities, our business, of course, governments, all the things that go with, the multitude of stakeholders we have. Importantly, among the most important things to me is running a very solid base business. So I'll come in a minute to drilling new wells and new completions and what have you, but I think here in the Bakken, in total, the basin's well over 1 million barrels, right? We have a very large, important base business. So with an ExxonMobil XTO as we go by here, that's a critical focus area for me. And when I say the base business, it's the key things around safety, our environmental performance, reliability, right? We've invested a lot in all of our kit and getting the most return on capital out of those investments, having that reliability, performance is very important. Also very important is managing cost with a long-term view. And so the efficiency component is something we all work very hard with. We work hard with our service companies on that. And then across all of those things, there's a technology element that we know we have to do really well to protect that base into the future. I know I have a good team here from ExxonMobil. They're going to share some of those more specific examples after lunch, and I hope you all get a chance to join in and listen to that.
Well, thank you. How about if we pull it in a little bit? What do you see as your near term? Where do you see ExxonMobil, in the near future?
Yes. So I'll speak specifically to the Bakken on that. I'll run out of time if I try to cover all the ground, but I'll stick just to the Bakken to start with. If you go back, I don't want to go too far back in history, but maybe the last couple of years, or in my time I've been affiliated with the Bakken, our core focus has been, as I mentioned, on that base business. Yeah. And then we also know that we need to continue to develop. We have, we're very, very grateful for the resource and the acreage that we set on. And so in the last 2 years, we've put about $1 billion of new capital into the basin. And that has been mainly on the stimulation completion side of the business, the facilities that go with that. So we've brought about 130 new wells to sales over the last 2 years. At the same time, we've been preparing for our next phase of development and getting rigs back in the basin. We have, we've been putting in infrastructure, pipelines. Just north of Lake Sakakawea, we've put in, 2 large compression stations. And that's the area that we're really excited about getting, back into developing and drilling. And so we have a spudder rig that's planned to come out here in the next, couple of months. And then, we've got, a drilling rig mobilizing in January. Okay. And, bringing a couple of rigs in, north of Lake Sakakawea and getting after that development. And those are our plans. Granted, we're a large corporation. All of our plans have to go through the board for final approval, but I'm quite confident that's what we're going to do. And part of my confidence, I should say, is I went back to talking about the base business. Across ExxonMobil, whether it's in the upstream or the chemical side of our business or refining, it is really true that we have to earn our right to attract capital from the corporation. And so businesses that don't run the base well, they get told to go back and keep practicing, sharpen the saw a bit more. And so I'm proud of the progress that we've made here. I think that puts us in a strong position to compete for that capital from the corporation. We've made that case clear, so that's what gives me confidence that as we lean into next year and get back into our our development and our drilling mode, I'm quite excited. And so from a volumes point of view, I kind of mentioned we're around the 115,000 barrels a day here now. I think in 2025 we'll probably see a little bit of a dip because we haven't been drilling, or the amount of DUCs we have has decreased. But again, with the new wells being drilled next year, that puts us in a growth mode from 2026 forward that more than offsets our base decline, and I think puts us in a position toward the back end of the decade to be in the 125, 130,000 barrels a day. So we're quite bullish. We like the asset. My team has been working very hard to get prepared to go and develop, and we're looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. And, it's really exciting to hear you talk about, getting, your drilling program and getting that up. But I did hear you talk a little bit about, the completions and how important they are. When you look at this Bakken asset, can you share with us a little bit of what you are doing, XTO, ExxonMobil, in the completions, and how is that technology continuing to evolve? I mean, it is so quickly changing and getting better by the day.
It really is. And so, I think, and I'm looking forward, hopefully you all can join the talk this afternoon because they're going to unpack that a little bit more. But, in the last, 18 months or so, we have developed a frac support center. So that sits in Houston. And what that center does is has, real-time data and visibility to every fracture, every completion job we're doing from North Dakota all the way down to Argentina. And we have folks that staff that frac support center that are a combination of engineers and folks that have grown up in the field and have a lot of just very, deep knowledge from doing the job every day. We work closely with our service providers in there, and there's just a multitude of things those teams are doing to continue to innovate, to get pump hours up, to when we do the stimulations to get the fractures to go in the right direction,
Exactly.
and to get uniformity, along the length of the horizontal. The progress has been phenomenal, and I would bet on this industry and our people to continue to move it forward.
Awesome. In those comments, you mentioned Argentina. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your work in Argentina? How does that impact, and play into the North Dakota and the Bakken work and experience?
Yeah, sure. I think let me start with the headline of Argentina is a complex combination of two things. So on the one hand, the subsurface there is truly phenomenal. And so the wells that we in ExxonMobil have drilled and completed there and brought online are, beyond the shadow of a doubt, our most prolific wells in the unconventional. Other operators have done the same in Argentina. So the rock is fantastic. The reservoir properties are fantastic. So that's on the one hand. The other hand is a macroeconomic situation at the national level that as a foreign investor, there's a lot of risk on the question of, can you make money? Can you get a return on the investment? And that is a significant challenge for any foreign investor in the country, because that's a risk that we have to manage. And so in a nutshell, that's how I would describe it. I'll just say a couple more things about that. It is pretty remarkable how that basin has grown. The first well was drilled there in kind of 2011 or so on the exploration side. We drilled our first well there in 2016. Even getting through the pandemic and those types of things, that basin, not dissimilar to the Bakken, has had to build out infrastructure, has had to get hydrocarbon laws in place that contemplated unconventional developments, because previously they had only been doing conventional. And that basin has grown from about 100,000 barrels a day in 2020 up there at about 400,000 barrels a day. They're building out infrastructure, so they're doing a great job. It is primarily local companies that are doing that development, the largest of which is YPF, that's the national oil company. For them to really unlock that potential, my view is, the country has to make a lot of progress in overcoming some of their very significant debt levels. Inflation has been a major issue. There are price controls, so the oil and gas price is set by the government. It's difficult to export. So there's just a number of what we would call above ground risks there. And, for us as ExxonMobil, I think we've reached the point to say there's probably better places for us to allocate our capital. We are actually going through a marketing process in Argentina to see if there is in fact a better owner for our assets. Time will tell how that plays out, but it comes back to the point I made around within the corporation, whether you're building a steam cracker in Singapore or, building a well pad and drilling wells in Argentina to putting in a compression station up here at the Bakken. Yeah. It has to compete, right? And so I think that Argentina struggles in that regard. So arguably you could say there's one less competitor in for that capital. As I've mentioned, I really like our position here in the Bakken. The economics are very strong. Gives me confidence that we'll get to do what we need to do.
Well, with that being said, Bryan, I'm going to just, slip in just a comment about just how business-friendly we are here in North Dakota.
Absolutely.
So be sure to bring that home to, the rest
Yes.
of the ExxonMobil people.
Yes. And I will tell you, that is the reputation of
Is
North
it?
Dakota. A fantastic place to do business. That's been my experience here the last couple of years. I grew up in Oklahoma. I love coming to North Dakota. I feel like home here, and it's a lot of similar values and things. I think people approach business a similar way. So that reputation, I would say, in North Dakota is far and wide, and one to not be taken for granted.
Well, we're very proud of it, so we're really proud to share it with you as well.
Yep.
Let's move a little bit. You know, in the last session here, Ron and Rick were talking a little bit about the M&As and that whole consolidation effort that's going on in our industry. I mean, it's not just here in North Dakota, but
Right.
of course this is where we're focused. Can you explain or share with us a little bit of your thoughts? How do you see it? I mean, to have your talent sitting on this stage, and we're so fortunate to have you here. How do you see this, and how does it impact the Bakken specifically?
Yeah, so I think, and it was interesting, I think in Todd's introduction around companies changing names, man,
Yeah.
I sit here today as ExxonMobil, and some people may say, is ExxonMobil here? Or are we XTO? Or are we Denbury? Or are we Pioneer? Who the hell are we, right? But anyway, so I think what I would say is, if the past is any indication of the future, and generally it is, I think that consolidations, are likely to continue. Who, where, when, and in what configurations, only time, will tell. For us as ExxonMobil, just over the past year, obviously we've had, two major mergers, right? And all those come back to, what are the individual strategies of the companies? What do those companies believe that they need to do to compete, well into the future for the long term? And so with an ExxonMobil about a year ago, we brought Denbury into the portfolio. That brought a few important things to us. Number one, with our ambitions on carbon capture and sequestration, that brought a undisputed pipeline, a CO2 pipeline network. So that's very important, I think, for our long-term ambitions as a corporation with carbon capture. Also coming in from Denbury, that brought in high-quality onshore sequestration sites from a subsurface point of view. And also from Denbury, last but not least, their expertise in EOR. That is a big benefit. So strategically, where we were moving as a corporation, we viewed that as very value accretive with what they brought to the table, combining with what we bring to do the things that link with our strategy. And of course, in May, we closed with Pioneer there in the Permian, and that will absolutely really transforms ExxonMobil's upstream portfolio. You heard Rick mention it's kind of known, it's a honey hole down there. We had a great position, Pioneer's position, essentially we doubled, our development acreage. It's very high quality acreage. And the synergies we get when we bring the two companies together, the expertise and so forth, it's well published. I think we can get, $2 billion per year of value synergies, kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 or more, for the next 10 years. So we've been active there. I think kind of bringing it back home here to the Bakken, my belief is, consolidations, when done well, can really be good, I think, for the basin, right? It generally creates stronger, more competitive companies. And stronger, more competitive companies can carry the baton further into the future. And, you heard Rick mention it. We've got, probably 10 years of more traditional development, drilling here, refracs, and so forth. But then we've got a really important job to do to get, the next 10 and 20 years here. So our companies and service companies, we need to bring the very best to bear here. And I think that doing that through, mergers and consolidations could be part of that. Look, there's some anxiety that can come with that, but, my encouragement to folks is to take that anxiety, turn it into motivation, and lean in. And again, trying to get benefits back to all stakeholders, right, for the long term.
And just a comment on that. We've done this as an industry before. Yeah. We had to do it when we had to reinvent ourselves and become more efficient as an industry post-boom time 2012, 2013, 2014. We can do it again. There's some pain points in the process. Well, I want to pick up on one thing. You had used the comment when you were talking about Argentina about, I think you said phenomenal. And you were referring about the geology. Well, I want you to share with you. We refer to our Bakken geology as the geologic jackpot. Yes. So, I think we're in good stead with the Argentina being, a top world-class, resource as well. But when we talk about the Bakken and we get into, CO2, we have beautiful geologic storage for this. In my world, I say that leads us to enhanced oil recovery. Can you share with us a little bit of your thoughts on where does this take us with the EOR efforts and, of course, your work with Denbury acquisition?
Sure. Yeah, so I think broadly for us as ExxonMobil, we view enhanced oil recovery and unconventionals as a very important technology for increasing resource recovery. We all know with our primary recovery, we leave a significant, 90+% of the value in the ground. So with an ExxonMobil, we view this as a very important technology to unlock, to increase recovery, and to get the value benefits that flow, to all stakeholders with that. So what I would say in ExxonMobil, what we have proven is that EOR works in unconventionals. Where we have work to do is can we make EOR and unconventionals commercial and at scale for large-scale development. So there's a few challenges there, maybe a couple that I'll just briefly mention that we're working through. One is on the surface, you're right, and it's really the cost side. So to do EOR in unconventional at scale, there's a lot of horsepower that's required to do the compression, to get the products back in the ground, and so we've got to work on ways to get those costs down, and particularly if you're cycling CO2, the metallurgy challenges that come with that have to be overcome. And then when you get to the subsurface side, there's choices to be made around, okay, are you injecting natural gas? Are we injecting CO2? Where does surfactants fit in? Is it combinations of those things? And then when those products get into the subsurface, a challenge we have to solve is understanding where exactly does that gas go in the subsurface, right? And so there are regulatory components of that need to be well understood so that when we seek permits, we do it confidently. You may be next to landowners or sensitive areas where, they do not want CO2 understandably moving, beneath their subsurface. So solving those challenges is going to be important, but we are determined to do that. I think as an industry, I can tell you in the Permian, we have a very large-scale EOR pilot that is in the works right now. We have an active smaller-scale EOR pilot we're doing here in the Bakken now. I heard the conversation with Rick around moving learnings around. I can assure you that the learning exchange is critically important not only for us as ExxonMobil between basins, but for the industry on a whole. This is a really important technology for this basin into the future, and I would bet on our industry any day. It won't happen overnight. We have to keep casting the net here, and mixing, physics and theory with empirical trial and error. That's part of what we're going to have to do, and this won't happen overnight. These time frames may be in the 5 to 10 years before we get to that point where we can scale it. But many of the leaders in this room back in their companies, we've got to lean into this and do the important collaboration and make it work. It'll be a huge benefit for this basin.
I agree with you. It will be a huge benefit. That goes to the idea that the hardest part of this whole oil and gas industry is finding the oil.
Yes.
We know where it is.
Yes.
We know where it is. Now, how do we get more of that out of the ground? So to that point, can you go just a little bit more into where does the carbon sequestration fit, and do you see that being the way to the enhanced oil recovery? And I'd like also, how do we do this in dealing with the public and the landowners that we respect? How do we bridge that? How do you see that in your world?
I think let me just. I'm going to come back to our Denbury acquisition, right?
Okay.
And I'll talk about carbon capture and sequestration. That was a really centerpiece of that acquisition. And for ExxonMobil, as we think about our goals out through 2050 and net zero and those types of things, in the skill sets we want to bring to the table, carbon capture and sequestration. I'll come back to EOR in just a moment, but the carbon capture component we view as a place that we can contribute to what is an enormous, global challenge. And so we've only had Denbury for about a year now. And I'll tell you, most of our work has been doing the detailed work along the U.S. Gulf Coast, because that's where we view, from a carbon capture and storage point of view, to be most economically advantaged, because you have the combination of large industrial emitters in proximity to a pipeline network, and importantly, in proximity to both onshore sequestration sites and offshore sites. So that's probably been the most focus I've seen within the corporation so far as it relates to carbon capture. Now, if I come back to the EOR piece, I think we still have more work to do. While that's been the focus, we do have teams working on that. Just not far from here in Montana, we've got the Cedar Creek anticline, which Denbury was bringing online. They put in a 110 mile or thereabout pipeline, bringing CO2 in from Wyoming and all the way up, not far from where we are today, right? And so that project is active today. We're injecting, and then I think when I think about the Bakken, right, that pipeline's not far away. So we have the sources of CO2 and bring it into the Bakken, and whether you're using it for EOR or carbon capture, that's the challenge we all have ahead to figure out. But I do view it as part of the solution. And particularly and I should have mentioned this earlier, but CO2 has some favorable properties when you think about the miscibility when you get it down whole, or its ability to mix with the oil and to swell the oil, arguably more favorable and economic than just pure natural gas options. So it's great that we have that infrastructure that's kind of right on our back door, or front door, if you will, here in the Williston Basin. That's a large part of solving this long-term problem, is a good, solid supply of CO2.
I agree with you. You also spoke a little bit about collaboration, not so much collaboration, but sharing. And this is, can't really be, lone rangers out there doing this work. No. What do you see in the industry? What do you see, here with the Williston Basin, Bakken? Do you see working together? I always look to our UND and the Energy Environmental Research Center for, the fabulous work that they do. What else do you see industry-wide?
Yeah, I think, well, let me first kind of start here, say at home in the basin, right? Again, I'm relatively new, only a couple of years. I went to the Williston Basin Petroleum Conference, here earlier this year. That really blew me away.
In a good way.
In a good way, it was fantastic. Just the amount of drive and ingenuity to do all the things that have happened in this basin over the last 10, 15 years, and to get to 5 billion barrels. You saw how few fields have ever done that globally. That doesn't happen by luck. That is the ingenuity, the innovation, the very hard work by the people here in North Dakota and kind of surrounding areas. So I think culturally up here, collaboration comes pretty natural, right? Folks look after each other, whether it's in communities at home, and I think that spreads over into business. And I witnessed it firsthand at the meeting a few months ago. I'm getting to see it a second time here. I love looking at the agenda and all the topics that we're going through. And you mentioned an important part there around academia. The universities have a real role to play in this. They bring unique capabilities in addition to industry. Again, I mentioned that the theory, the physics, these things with the hands-on, those two have to come together. So it gives me a lot of optimism going into the future here.
Bryan, you mentioned you've been 2 years on the Unconventionals. Yes. With ExxonMobil. Just so you know, in our world, that's a well-experienced person here in the Bakken. So you've been here for forever.
Well, I feel like a complete new guy when Rick talks about drilling wells in 1942.
Hey, wait a second. I was there with Rick, and it wasn't 42, Bryan, so. Phew.
Maybe it was 82. Okay,
82.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hey, I'll tell you, that's a wealth of experience there. And your two years in Unconventionals here, I consider that truly pretty well experienced.
Okay.
You have a pretty good handle on things. I'm going to just turn the tables just a minute as we get close to wrapping up here. If you were sitting and changing chairs with John or whomever out here, what would you ask? What would you want to know from ExxonMobil?
Yeah, I think, part of what I've tried to offer today is a little bit of a perspective from an IOC, a company of our scale. Mm-hmm. I think if I were sitting there, I would look at this basin as home, and I would ask, hey, what do we need? What are the strengths of our basin, and what do we need to continue to do to assure and drive success into the future, which is not guaranteed. I think I would ask something along those lines, and the way I would probably answer that, or maybe even answer myself, is to say, I think the Bakken has a lot of strengths, right? It's an oil play, number one, and there are advantages in being an oil play versus a pure dry gas play when it comes to profitability. This basin the infrastructure is mature, meaning as operators and developers, getting our product to market and getting it sold is a challenge that you all have overcome. That's a big tailwind. The service companies, the providers here, critically important, innovative, great partners. So that is a strength of this basin. And what I think is important going forward is, none of this can be taken for granted. We have to all continue to lean in and to make the most of what's ahead of us. I think it's remarkable. We've crossed the 5 billion barrel mark. I think we've got to lean in to get the next 5 and the next 5 after that. And what motivates me, and I hope motivates everyone in here too, is obviously the products we produce and bring to the world are critically important. But bringing it back home a bit, when you look at the benefits to the local economy, the benefits to the state economy, and that flows when you look at the scale of the Bakken, the benefits flow all the way to the U.S. economy. That links to U.S. energy security. It's phenomenally important, and just so proud of what happens here, and excited for what's ahead.
Well, thank you very much, and we are so proud to be part of this industry as you are. Bryan, thank you so much, because you are sending us on our way with a very positive, forward-looking message. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kathy. My pleasure.
Okay.